My name is Karen Horwitz. I'm a director of an organization founded to unite teachers and parents who had discovered what I had discovered. Most of our schools are no longer institutions for education. I'm not here to blame our policymakers or the media. I believe they do not really know what's going on. The lack of regulations coupled with tax-subsidized propaganda has led to the unimaginable. Today they have a clean slate. After today, we must watch them and not leave them alone until they protect our children by learning a truth about the education world that they failed to learn about, the financial world. Unregulated means disaster. Now I look around me today, I don't know if we have 50 people here. We sent this out to hundreds of people in the press, in the media. We invited tens of thousands of people. We were just informed that some superintendents sent out emails intimidating people so they wouldn't come. Why isn't the press here? I don't know. But today is a landmark day because this is public. Even if it's only 50 of us, it's public. And if they go on television or any place and say they care about their schools, but they don't want to hear what we have to say, they're not telling us the truth. And we need to get after them. And today is the beginning. I was called to teach. I was pushed out of my teaching career on trumped-up charges. I felt compelled to teach the public about what's going on in education, so I wrote a book entitled White Chalk Crime, The Real Reason Schools Fail. Today, I want to just give you a small course on what that is. I heard Bill Gates say that our education system is gypping people. No one disputes that. But isn't it interesting that there's only 50 people here with a gypping education system? What needs to be understood is how this is being done. I must tell you that it's complex. When people head up a corrupt operation, one of the first things they do is make things painfully convoluted so that outsiders will not figure out the game. One really quick way of helping you understand this is to compare it to our financial crisis. Our schools are on the same trajectory as our banks, and what we will find at their inescapable crash will be worse. It will be dysfunctional kids and the destruction of the American dream. You see, at the top of education, we have the same greedy types as we have in our financial institutions, and that is what some of us have been desperately trying to expose. This is why our schools are a mess. It's not bad teachers, lazy parents, or worthless kids, although we do have some of those. It is greed at the top. But why don't you know this? Well, there's no press here today. That's one reason. Well, and there's a convenient tactic in place called teacher abuse that terrorizes dedicated educators into silence. I bet some of your heads are spinning hearing talk about teachers being terrorized. Head spinning is perfect for people who wouldn't support something if they understood it. Most everyone thinks you cannot fire a teacher and that unions give teachers too much power. This is propaganda straight from the people who are leading the special interest bonanza, who I call educrats, with an emphasis on the rats. The truth is that it's expensive to terminate teachers so they don't waste their money. They fire teachers like those you're going to hear today who get in their way. Actually, they don't fire that many of us because the majority accept settlement offers and sign gag orders and resign, so you never hear from us. Our economic experts tell us that Wall Street failed because we trusted them. Now let's examine that. We trusted people whose sole purpose was to make money. Then how would you identify what we are doing with the alleged humanitarians leading our schools? I would describe it as something between blind trust and hero worship. Folks, if our financial world could crumble so badly due to a lack of regulations, how could our schools have a chance when there's absolutely, positively, unequivocally no oversight? And I can prove this. I taught in an affluent district in the North Shore of Chicago. I was a returning teacher in my 40s. The next year, they hired a 29-year-old inexperienced principal. She wanted the older teachers out and proceeded to abuse us regularly, so we would resign. Now, I think you know that's illegal. We have a law against age discrimination, but when I appealed to my superintendent, he told me that if I escalated the issue, he would make my life miserable. I then went to the board for protection from her. The board refused to investigate what she was doing. Instead, they built a phony case against me and fired me. I was entitled to a due process hearing. The hearing officer said he didn't care if they were picking on me. He found me insubordinate for calling my educrats untruthful, after he banned all testimony that proved my educrats were indeed untruthful. He simply chose to trust the educrats. I appealed this ruling all the way up to our U.S. Supreme Court. Despite my undeniable proof that I was abused out of my position while children were harmed, our highest court had no interest in a case that screamed, "We need oversight in our schools." It could not and would not hear this case. The tacit agreement in this country is we trust our schools. End of story. The futility of the legal path, along with the media's failure to investigate, made this a court of public opinion issue and why we had to be here today. Let me further explain the no regulations claim. When I was threatened by my superintendent, I called the Illinois State Board of Education trying to figure out who regulates schools. A gentleman explained to me that the state boards are not watchdogs. He said the only power over a district, the only power, is the local school board. I asked who watches over them, and he said the people. It's all about the elections. I thought about the last election. They had smeared all attempting to change the rubber stamp board. You know, the board that refused to investigate? I must have asked this man the same question 100 ways. I just could not believe that there was no one making sure these people obeyed the law. Saying the local paper was in the district's pocket would fail to describe their closeness. They worked together as though they owned each other's firstborn son. But this is still the America I grew up to love. I am here speaking. I was taught to know I could do this. I'm here today to make sure we take our schools back before the inevitable education crash. And this crash will be the end of our democracy because the institution that ensures our democracy will have been taken over by the power mongers who have no interest in democracy. Our dysfunctional schools lay the groundwork for a system of top-down control agreed to by the undereducated. When the beneficiaries of good schools are no longer here, there will be no one to speak truth to power. You need to know white chalk crime in order to end it. It is white-collar crime with a twist. It includes the biggies like embezzlement, but it also includes harmful leadership and teacher abuse. Given that good teachers are the vital part of a school, cleansing principled people who refuse to obey directives that are harmful to children is probably the educrats' single most destructive act. Whether their motive is to replace them with their political allies or to make sure no one with a conscience remains close to the wrongdoing taking place, the loss of dedicated teachers destroys our school while it destroys the lives of these very gentle souls. Because outsiders just cannot believe this is happening, teachers suffer in isolation. Meanwhile, colleagues crippled with fear submit to whatever. And that's whatever. For years you've heard the unions blamed for the education mess. Sorry to burst your bubble, but they're only secondary players. Our school boards and superintendents, the ones that hold the power, leave even our unions with no choice. To remain in business, they capitulate and participate in teacher abuse, just as the teachers that want to keep their jobs look the other way when their colleagues are led to slaughter. And just why they're not here today, because they're afraid. We even had teachers call the organizer of this march and say their unions told them they cannot participate or they will get in trouble. Although unions serve their masters well, making sure the public is turned off to teachers, unions are the passengers, not the drivers. So as appalling as some of their acts are, you must stay focused on those who control and direct this human horror show. Further, there are many secondary players, some by intention and some by default. Lawyers typically flip on teachers once they figure out the politics. School boards with their bottomless pockets of tax monies can drive any adversary to the poorhouse, and lawyers are not inclined to go along for that ride. The media, well, beyond the local papers, indulge the powers to be, keeping the truth hidden. Vendors enjoy kickbacks. Textbook companies thrive. These predatory accomplices keep the gravy train going, but if we expect to change things, we must get to the